Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking Scents. I'm Ben. I hope you've had a great week. This week I've been wearing quite a lot of patchouli fragrances, and I thought today I'd review this one, which is the last of the decants that I bought kind of over January, Christmas time, and it's Ermenegildo Zegna, Javanese Patchouli. Javanese Patchouli, what is it? It's Ermenegildo Zegna's a Sensei collection, which is essentially their kind of posh, quite high-priced collection. That's about it. And they've released a bunch of fragrances for this collection, and they're all sort of from an area and focusing on a particular ingredient. So, for example, this one's Javanese Patchouli, but they've also got like Florentine Iris, Haitian Vetiver, Indonesian Oud, Mediterranean Neroli, Peruvian Ambret, Sicilian Mandarin, Italian Bergamot, and I think that's about it. Yeah, every single one was done by a different perfumer. This one is Frank Velke, who I'm not really familiar with actually. I know he's done some Lee LeBeau stuff, but I'm not too familiar with him. Just a heads up, if you don't really like patchouli, just turn away now, because this fragrance is serious patchouli. There has been another review of this. A Gentleman's Journey reviewed it. He did like a collaboration review with E from Simply Put Scents. I quite like E. I feel like his kind of, when he reviews kind of darker fragrances, my kind of tastes align with his quite a bit. So, you know, I'm not going to copy everything they said, but one thing he did say about this fragrance, which I think really sums it up, and I say, if you don't like patchouli, just turn away now, because this is seriously dank. He said it was dank, and really, I don't want to copy their review at all. I want to do my own thing, but that word really does capture this fragrance. It is dank as hell. So let's get into it. Let's give it a spray, see what it smells like. The opening is quite strong, and we do sort of need to give it a little bit of a second, because it's really big, and I tell you what, it's really masculine. It's one of the most masculine fragrances probably that I own. It's very strongly masculine, and it opens with this huge, like I say, dank patchouli, and to call it, say it's very raw is another one. Like dank and raw are really good words to describe this patchouli. The way I imagine it is, if you get a load of fresh patchouli and you've cut it up with a knife, and then you turn the knife on the side and just crush it all with the blade, and then if you turned it over and all that kind of juice and stuff from the kind of crushed patchouli, like the pressed leaves and stuff, smell that. That's what this is going to smell like. It's damp, it's wet, it's raw, and it's very, very, it's really good quality. It does smell really great, but it smells, it's very, very, to call it earthy is almost not enough. You know, sometimes you get those kind of dusty sort of patchoulis that remind you of kind of bookshelves and old musty kind of rooms. This is not that kind of patchouli. This is much rawer, it's much darker, it's sort of, very, very, very dark. Another sort of image that this conjures up is, you know, if this patchouli is growing somewhere in the ground, it's the bottom of a well. You know, it's seriously dark. It's the leaves of the patchouli would be almost like black, like dark green, borderline kind of like charcoal black colour leaves. It's so raw, so dirty, and so earthy. One thing it is in particular as well is a little bit skanky. Absolutely not gonna lie there. Get into that in a second, because right now I'll talk about what it smells like apart from the patchouli, because there are some other things in here. The notes are patchouli, cedar, bergamot, pepper, and tonka, and that's it. So it's pretty straightforward, and I would say that's pretty transparent, except from the bergamot, which I don't smell for a second in this. It's supposedly, all of the Sensei lines are supposedly bergamot grown from Ermenegildo Zegna's own kind of farm or whatever, like orchard. But I don't smell any bergamot in this at all. What I do smell with the opening is a very, very, very dark, dank, raw patchouli. And alongside that, just a tiny wisp of almost like tonka, like a sweetness that comes with a tonka. And as that kind of progresses, that smells really great, and it's very masculine, really masculine. But as it progresses, and it doesn't take long, you start getting the pepper and the cedar comes out a little bit. Now, this is where it gets a bit skanky, because the mix of the patchouli and the cedar and the pepper together, I don't think there's anything skanky in it. I think it's the mix and the way that they sit together, because you can smell it coming in and then you can smell it go away, because the skank doesn't last forever, but it gets very skanky. And to me, it's not pleasant. It smells like sweat. It smells like you know, like old sweat on a t-shirt or something. It's not that great, and it definitely has that vibe to it. But it is kind of interesting. But it puts this fragrance in a funny spot, which I'll talk about. I'll come back to. But yeah, when it opens, it's got this almost like mentholated. The patchouli as well is almost mentholated. You know, patchouli is a mint anyway, but quite often you don't really get that facet, you know. But in this, you definitely get this kind of menthol, minty kind of facet. And just this creamy sweetness from the tonka. And then the cedar comes in, and it gets a bit skanky. Now, I sprayed this on a friend of mine. I didn't tell him anything about it. I just said, hey man, it's patchouli, do you want to have a go? And he was like, yeah, definitely. But I wanted to get his take on it. So I just let him spray it, and he was like, cool, you know, that's a heavy patchouli. And I was like, yeah, you know, give it a minute and it'll come out a little. And I asked him, what do you think that smells like? And he smelt it, and he said, baby sick. So, you know, he's not a fragrance guy. That's the thing. He's definitely not into fragrances. But that was, you know, to be honest, that's not far off, because with that tonka as well, you do get a slightly milky vibe, and it does go quite sour, like say sort of sour milk sweat kind of vibe. So I totally got where he's coming from, but I wasn't sure if it was just me or if this was a thing. You know, I wasn't sure if it was just the way it was on my skin. So I wanted to get another opinion, like completely unbiased, and he came up with baby sick. So, and I can kind of see where he's coming from. Now I've made that sound awful, bear with me, because it gets a lot better, and it lasts a while. Say the skank hasn't really come out just yet on me. It's getting there, but not quite, and it's very, very nice at this point. It's masculine. The cedar's lovely. But it's cold. This fragrance is seriously cold. It's very refined, very classy, but it's like absolute ice cold. And you sort of, sometimes you have vanilla fragrances and things like that, and I use words like, you know, comfy blanket, and a lot of people use words like comfy blanket, comforting, you know, it feels like its arms are open and welcoming. This is the complete opposite to that. This is an absolute ice cold, stone hard, still wall. It's like arms closed, get out of my face kind of vibe. It's absolutely rock solid, but it's very formal, and that gives it a very formal, a very refined, classy edge. But see, that's where I struggle with this, because now I start smelling the sweat coming out and stuff like that, and the skanky side of it, and that's what makes this fragrance so difficult. So would I buy this, a full bottle of this, once this decant's run out? And this is the tough question with this fragrance, because I want to say yes, because I really like it. It's grown on me. The skankiness doesn't last forever, and when it does last, it's not even that bad. I've made it sound probably quite bad, and it is a bit of a challenge, not gonna lie. It's definitely a challenge. It's not a blind buy, this one, even if you like patchouli. Like, it's definitely not a blind. But it's a challenge on more levels than one, because it's also a challenge for me to think, when would I actually wear this? Because it's very refined and very classy, so you think, great, I you know, to be honest, I could do with more of those sorts of fragrances. I've got a couple, don't have a loads. So, you know, if I had to do something that was very straight, very formal, this could go down well. But then you've got that skanky edge, And that's quite creative, and I really appreciate that. This fragrance doesn't use very many ingredients, but it still managed to maintain quite a creative edge. I really appreciate that about this fragrance, and I think it's really great. But do you really want that when you're trying to be formal and straight? You know, that seems like two worlds that are colliding there, like a quite creative, skanky edge that, you know, gives it quite something a little bit kind of fascinating and difficult and interesting. And then you've also got this kind of cold, straight, very formal, very refined, formal scent that's quite dark and as well, which is great. I mean, all of those things are great, but can you really get away with that skankiness in that sort of situation, in a formal situation where you want to wear something like this? That kind of creative skank is not gonna. Do you see what I'm saying? It's kind of dancing in a limbo somewhere between like being like perfectly formal and quite playful and edgy, and I don't know where I would wear that. So that makes me think, if I bought a full bottle of this, it's just going to end up sitting on my shelf forever and wasting away, which would definitely be a waste because it's a really nice fragrance. So would I buy another one? Probably not. You know, I'm probably just going to stick with this decant, and I'll be surprised if I even use it all. But that's not to say it's a bad scent. I really enjoy the scent. I think it's really nice. I think they've done a really good job with it. I think the cedar in it is gorgeous. It's really, really industrial, very like processed wood, which gives it that kind of cold vibe. And the pepper is just enough. The tonka is really super well balanced, just to sit under it all and just give it just a hint of sweetness, which I think it does need. And the patchouli is something quite special in it. But it does also progress over time. So I said it earlier, it didn't stay skanky, and it doesn't, but it takes a couple of hours to get out of that sort of mode. And then it sits right back as a skin scent. Once you've kind of got through that, all you're kind of left with, the patchouli comes actually right down in the fragrance, which I was quite surprised. But it drops right back, and it almost just takes over as like a soft woody fragrance, and it's mainly cedar. And it's really, really good at that point, because you get this like really industrial, refined cedar with like just this hint of tonka underneath that's just adds just a touch of like kind of creamy sweetness, and it's really nice. But it does take a couple of hours to get there, and getting there is having to go through that stage, like I said, where I'm not sure it works, because I'm not sure what crowd it's playing to, you know. I'm not quite sure what situation I could confidently wear this and know that it's going to be doing, you know, saying what I want it to say, and that's tough, you know. So it's a tricky one. But having said all that, I really appreciate it. I think it's a really nice fragrance. The ingredients are clearly quality, and I think it smells great. And I really love the creativity behind using such a small amount of notes, but being quite creative with them. I think that's great. So, you know, in terms of masculine, feminine, definitely leans masculine. But my mum really likes patchouli, and she's tried it on, and she really enjoyed it, and I thought it smelled good on her. So it definitely can swing, despite the fact that it is heavily masculine. It's a very cold fragrance, but it's not particularly fresh. So, but I think if you live in a climate like England, like me, you can get away with wearing it any time of year, really. I'm not sure I'd want to wear it in like the high heat of summer, but say in England with the climate, it never gets that too mental. So I think it would work even in like summer evenings. But it does definitely lend itself to cold weather, because it's a cold fragrance, but it's not a fresh fragrance. It's definitely dark. It's definitely quite dry. But it's very cold. Otherwise, say very formal. That's where I would wear this. Despite I'm not sure where it really fits, I still think it leans very formal. I don't think it's very playful. It's creative and it's interesting, but it's not, you know, cozy. I wouldn't wear it on dates, things like that. You're going to come across like a right hard bastard. But otherwise, beautiful fragrance, absolutely dank, absolutely fantastic patchouli. If you like dirty patchoulis, just don't even. You just go nuts on it, because I think you'll really enjoy it. But I do think it's a tricky one, definitely a challenge, not a blind buy, but otherwise fantastic. Ermenegildo Zegna, Javanese Patchouli, yeah, I really like it. I think it's great patchouli. Little bit of a challenge, little bit skanky, but overall really great. So yeah, cheers, thanks for watching.